Good morning to everyone who has joined us today for our live webinar. My name is Janet Foley. I'm the Vice Principal of GEMS Founders School, Dubai. And we'll be talking to you today about a couple of things that some of our parents have raised concerns about. So we just want to reassure some of our parents and any of our non-parents who've also joined us this morning as we look ahead to the next academic year as well. Before we actually begin the seminar, I'd like to just remind everybody that we are recording this. So for anyone who wants to join us later, they will be able to access a recording of the webinar, and also any comments that are made in the webinar will be available later. We aren't able to take any additional questions at this moment, but we'll give you details at the end of the webinar regarding how you can send us further questions should we not have answered all of your concerns by the end of the webinar. So I'd like to first of all now introduce the other presenters of the webinar for you. If we could please see our presenters on the next slide. Miss Mary, thank you. So shortly we'll be hearing from our Principal and CEO of GEMS Founders School and our brand leader, Mr. Matthew Burfield. Mr. Ian Plant will also be presenting, our Head of Secondary, along with Mr. John Stapley, our Head of Primary School as well. And we're also joined today by Miss Hannah Davis. She is the Manager of School Operations here at GEMS Founders, but also has responsibility for other schools within our group here in Dubai and also a few schools outside of Dubai as well. So a lot of experience amongst our team here. And the next slide, please. So a very big welcome from us here at Founders. And as I say, we went to our parent body and asked them about their concerns, and they kind of fell into two fields. One, a little bit more about the end of year. We've still got a few weeks left of our remote learning, so we wanted to address a few questions and concerns as we continue to finish this academic year. And also, as I said, what we can expect moving forward into 2021. But what we're not able to do today is give you any definitive answers. We really don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what changes may be on the horizon. But what we do want to try to do during this webinar is just give you some reassurance that there are plans in place, and we are looking at all possible scenarios and working with many of the authorities to make sure that everything is ready for whatever happens. As you well know, many of you who are here in Dubai, changes and can happen very, very quickly. So we just want to make sure that we're ready to accommodate any of the instructions coming from our authority. Thank you, Miss Mary. So as I've said, we've really been listening to our parents, not only within Founders School, but also within the GEMS group. And two questions that were in our GEMS survey came back very positively for our school, and we were very pleased to see that there were very few negative responses to these questions about our remote learning provision so far. But we did also send additional surveys from GEMS Founders School itself. The next slide, please, Mary. So in our week 9 survey that we asked our parents if they had seen improvements as we've been working through the remote learning provision since it began, over 75% of our parents said that they had seen improvement. So that was great that we were able to see that as we were working through these challenging times, we were able to really improve what we were providing, and we honestly believe that we are providing the best possible remote learning that we can. Another question that we asked our parents, though, in the last survey, thank you, Mary, the next slide, was in relation to their confidence with their child transitioning into the next academic year. And whilst the large majority of our parents were confident or somewhat confident that their child would cope well, there were 14% of our parents who responded who were not at all confident. And really that's what this webinar is to address, to talk to you about some of the ways that we can perhaps increase that level of confidence in those parents. So without further ado, I think the next slide, please, Mary. We are going to split this into our 2 sessions, as I said, the end of year arrangements and looking forward. So we'll be talking to you in a moment. Mr. Matthew will come on and talk about that continuation of remote learning, a little bit about re-enrollment for next year. Then Mr. Matthew will hand over to our heads of schools, who will be talking about those end of year arrangements. And then Miss Hannah will come in to talk about what will happen during the summer to prepare and get our school ready for whatever scenario we have to present to you in August, September. So for our first presenter for part 1, I'd like to hand over now to our principal and CEO, Mr. Matthew Burfield. Thank you, Matthew.
Good morning to all our founders' families. It's coming, Mary, don't worry. Good morning to all our founders' families. Thank you very much, Miss Jan, for introducing that for everybody and giving such a clear picture for why we are here today. As we said, one of the main areas we want to start with is talking about just the end of year arrangements, but also a moment just to reflect on what we've achieved already. You can see there lots of wonderful pictures that have been shared, some of our colleagues, some of our children, but the reality is that we have approached this over the last 12 weeks with agility. And that's an important word that I'm going to focus on in many parts of what I'm going to talk about, is that agility to be able to maneuver when we've been given new commands, new instructions and new ideas about how to move forward, whether that be from the authorities or whether that be from our parent body. We're learning as we go, but one thing that is certain, and one thing that Miss Jan has certainly shared there for us, is that we have made progress throughout this process. We will continue to do so. We've made progress since 2016 by listening to our families. One of the phrases that's been used and shared by my colleague, Mr. Ian, is about the fact that the school is a community. It's not just a building, it's a community. And our founders community has been built by listening to each other, by supporting each other, by sharing positivity and kindness. These are critical elements. They're what's allowed us to be successful over the last 12 weeks. We know we can still improve and we still continue to listen, as we explained at the start of this. But the reality is we've achieved so much over 12 weeks because of the agility and the dynamism of our staff and our community and the way we've approached this together. Now, this moves me into a really critical element. We have been reminding you for weeks and weeks and weeks about the concept that we need you now to re-enroll. As of tomorrow, that re-enrollment deadline will close. Now, we do genuinely understand the circumstances that everybody is going through right now. We have done everything humanly possible over the last 12 weeks to support our community, whether that be through the GEMS COVID relief package, which has over 1,300 of our families who have had access to that. Payment plans that we've helped with our parents, which take us all the way through into July for those parents who needed that help. And that's another 1,100 parents who've availed that one. We've also extended the re-enrollment deadline all the way through from March 30th, which is when we would normally ask you to secure your seats here at Founders. You all know the incredible demand that is on this school, even more so in today's context, when people are looking for quality schooling at an affordable price. Founders stands alone when it comes to that in the Dubai landscape. We've been aware of that for the last 4 years, and that continues to be the case. The demand is high. However, we've done everything to give all of our founders' families the chance to be with us next academic year. We cannot extend it any further. For us to be able to secure the best quality teachers, to make sure that we get all the resources that those children need in September, whatever scenario we face, we now must close the re-enrollment tomorrow. So please, if you haven't done already, please contact our staff, complete the re-enrollment, secure your child's place for the new academic year, because then they will be in our planning and we won't be opening that up for our new families, of which we have nearly 2,000 waiting to join us for what will be, I'm sure, very few places here next year. We can't extend it further. It will close tomorrow. So please don't reach out and ask for more. We can only leave it until tomorrow. Now, one of the things that's really important, though, is how we close this year. So I would like to just now hand over to my colleague, Mr. John, our head of primary, who's going to talk you through the end of year arrangements in primary, and then to Mr. Ian, our head of secondary, to give you a flavour of what happens at the end of this year in the last 3 weeks. Mr. John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthew, and good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. I trust you're all safe and well wherever you are. So, end of year arrangements in primary. Well, each year group will be communicating their specific arrangements for their students. What normally comes out at the end of the year are end of year reports. As we have done with our previous reports this year, they will be available through the GEMS Connect app. So please make sure that you've downloaded that one, and they will be loaded to the GEMS Connect app in the final week of the term, which is imminent, 3 weeks to go. So I know we've had some questions already about teachers and new teachers. So your child's new teacher will be communicated to you over the summer. We've also had some questions that have come in related to, can students remain with their current teacher? And unfortunately, no, for a variety of reasons, this is not possible. One of the main reasons being here that, you know, year 5 passes on to year 6 passes on to year 7, and that key transition into the secondary school, the students must move on, and they'll have the secondary students there, secondary teachers. Thinking ahead as well into summer, how to keep your students busy, how to keep your children busy. No, please do continue to involve them in those practical tasks at home, helping in the kitchen, measuring things, measuring, cutting, helping around the house, reading. Please keep your children reading as much as they can over summer to give them that best chance to be ready for September and what life will like as we return to school right then. Times table, number bonds, all these things, little bit and often. That will be my recommendation. So thank you. I'll pass on to Mr. Ian now for the secondary update.
Thank you, Mr. John, for that. I really appreciate those words. And good morning to our parents, wherever you are in the world, and the prospective parents that may be joining this webinar this morning. I certainly wish that you and your families are in good health wherever you are in the world. So following on from what Mr. John said, the secondary school arrangements for the end of the year obviously are well underway and have been for quite some time right now. Many of the questions that we've received are regarding the assessment and how that looks as we approach the end of this academic year. What I can say is that continuous assessment has been taking place throughout the remote learning period in many shapes and forms. Many of our students in the secondary school, like in the primary school, will have taken the new group reading test, the NGRT, at home, which was a very unique situation, and we have now thoroughly analysed those results. And we'll be looking at those results as to how we can continue to develop our reading provision across the summer and, of course, at the start of the new academic year. All of you will be acutely aware that during the months of May and June, typically the GL progress tests in English, Maths and Science take place. And for obvious reasons, these have not been possible. And at the end of this webinar, we'll talk about how we will provide the progress tests at the start of the new academic year in September. For our students in years 11, 12 and 13, who typically would have been taking GCSE, IGCSE, AS and A-level examinations, all of you will be aware that those examinations, not just in this country, but worldwide, were cancelled. And we've been working very, very closely with our teams, our heads of department, our middle leaders, our teachers. Everybody's involved and engaged with our students at this critical level to make sure that we have calculated centre assessment grades very, very carefully, which are honest and will reflect the grades that our students deserve and have worked hard for throughout the past 2 years at GFS. These centre assessment grades have now been submitted to Oxford AQA and will be submitted to Cambridge Assessment International Education in the very near future. And thank you for all of the cooperation from our wonderful students throughout this process. Like Mr. John said, our end of year reports have been written and they are going to be published on the GEMS Connect app at the end of this academic term in the final week. Like Mr. John said, once again, a reminder to please download the GEMS Connect app if you haven't done so already. These reports provide a holistic view of progress throughout the academic year, alongside attainment levels and a written comment from all of your child's teachers and tutors. At the end of this webinar, like I said, we'll talk about the provision for assessment in the start of the new academic year, but now I'll hand back to Miss Jan.
Thank you both very much. I hope you can all hear me now. Mary, can you give me a thumbs up that you can hear me? Yeah, there we go. Hi, thank you very much, everybody. Bear with us for this. This is our first kind of group live webinar. So thank you very much to our heads of school there for giving us a great introduction to how the end of year arrangements will go in regards to assessments and reports. The next presenter is, as you can see on the screen there, our Manager of School Operations, Miss Hannah Davis. Hannah looks after GEMS Founders School here in Al Barsha very well. She also looks after GEMS Founders in Mizhar, amongst other schools, but also is within our Manager of MSO, Manager of School Operations network, able to reach out to a lot of her colleagues in other parts of the world, and has learned a lot of lessons, I believe, from our colleagues in the Far East regarding the impact on schools of the COVID-19 virus. So I'll hand now over to Miss Hannah, who will talk to us a little bit about how the school will be prepared and the summer works ready for whatever scenario we have in August, September. Miss Hannah, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Since we saw you last, the school inside and out, plus all our resources, have been deep cleaned and sanitised by fully trained staff using Dubai Municipality approved chemicals and equipment. This sanitisation is ongoing with an increased focus on high touch surfaces such as door handles and bathrooms. We're also increasing the number of hand sanitizer stations in these areas, along with some reminders, visual reminders for you to wash your hands more frequently. Safe distance floor markings have been placed in areas that are in use around the school, along with signage to advise on current procedures. Right now, we are sanitizing and packing up the student books ready for round 2 of the book collection for parents. Round 1 started as soon as we were given permission from the authorities, and we successfully issued books back to 1/3 of our community. We will use the same non-contact drive-through method for round 2, and we'll share details of when you can collect these on our D6 communicator. We're also moving soft furnishings and teaching resources that can't easily be sanitized into storage, things like rugs, sofas, dressing up clothes, those types of items. Planning is ongoing and will be in line with authority regulations when they are released for social distancing, transportation, clinic and healthcare procedures, catering solutions, and operating procedures such as arrivals and dispersals and movement around the school. Our facilities management teams, in addition to their usual preventative maintenance, are preparing for disinfection of the air conditioning vents and are reviewing the indoor air quality in all areas of our school. The STS bus fleet is undergoing a thorough deep cleaning and disinfection process, and all drivers and bus conductors will be trained on strict guidelines to ensure every bus is cleaned to the same high standard. We don't know what will specifically happen in the future, but we do know that we will be working together to mitigate the risks as much as possible. Educating our community and emphasising the importance of social responsibility plays a key role in this. The school team is ready to fully train staff, install required equipment, and implement policies and procedures in line with the Knowledge and Human Development Authority, Dubai Health Authority, and Dubai Municipality guidelines when they are issued. We will release guidelines or guidance in a variety of mediums for staff, parents, and our students on new procedures and what to expect on your first day back. So as always, will continue to keep the safety of our students and our community one of our highest priorities. Thanks, Ms. Jan. Back to you now.
Thank you very, very much, Miss Hannah. Clearly a lot of work already gone on at our school, and a lot already planned for our summer works when we have a little bit more guidance, as you say, from our authorities. So that concludes the first part of this webinar, looking at what the end of this year and going into the summer. But what we felt our parents might want a few more answers about is what the academic year is going to look like next year. As we said at the very beginning, we haven't got that crystal ball. We can't tell you exactly what that has looked like, but a lot of thought and planning has gone to look at those various contingencies. So I'd like now to hand back to Mr. Matthew so that he can talk to us a little bit around what GEMS has suggested and has been working with all of the GEMS schools across Dubai and the rest of the world in terms of contingency. Over to you now again, Mr. Matthew. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Jan, and thank you all colleagues who've helped give everybody a very clear picture there, as far as I'm concerned, of the end of year and then through to the summer. Now, the reason we've started with this slide is because we want to make it really clear that, of course, as a school here in Dubai, we are instructed to do things by our authorities. The range of authorities who are coordinating this effort and making sure that we have a clear answer is shown on the screen for you now. We'll wait for those authorities to give us the answers that they are working out as well. And I think it's really important for us all to recognise the unprecedented nature of this situation, the challenges that we're all trying to face together. And the one thing that we're waiting for, of course, is answers. And of course, we all want those. But unfortunately, those answers will only come when there is a clarity of exactly how this pandemic has moved forward. The authorities will continue to work with us, work with you, and when we have those answers, we will definitely communicate them out to you. Now, we don't just wait though, and one of the things that we can really take advantage of here is GEMS being a global organisation. We have schools in Singapore, in Chicago, we have them in Malaysia, we have them all over the world, to be honest. And one of the things that we've been able to do is to learn from those schools, particularly those that are in Southeast Asia that have gone through this process already and that have now reopened the schools and are facing challenges, of course, are facing a new norm, a different society than we were used to before. But they are going through it right now and we're learning from them. And what we've decided to do as a global organisation is to come up with a clear plan, a project that's been going on behind the scenes now for a number of weeks. This project outlines 3 specific scenarios. These have been shared by the Ministry of Education as concepts, but of course, behind any concept takes an awful lot of unpicking to make sure that it can be made and realised. Now, the 3 scenarios that we are looking at to join back in the new academic year, and again, we don't know which one is going to be chosen, but we're making sure all 3 are ready to go. So the 3 possible scenarios we have. The first is a continuation of what we're doing right now. Now, we understand the challenges of this. We know from parents, and as a parent myself, and as many of my colleagues are, this has been a difficult scenario for all of us to go through. We've learnt over the last 12 weeks how to do it better, and we will continue to do so. We're utilising the power of the GEMS Education Network to make sure we learn the best practice from each other. The good thing is, as well, is that KHDA have had DSIB coming through and looking at all the remote learning programs in Dubai. So they're also learning what is best practice. We will ensure that if there is a continuation of the remote learning in September, it is better than it is now. And that's not because I'm not incredibly proud of what we have achieved now, because I really am. The way our staff and our students have pulled together and made this work has been phenomenal. It's one more reason for us to love our community. It's one more reason why the agility and dynamism of founders has transformed the educational landscape here in the UAE. We continue to do so by offering a really strong remote learning program with many live access points, but also lots of asynchronous opportunities for children and parents who are going to work and can't work during the school day on this material. So it's really important that that will get better, but we're really proud of what we've achieved so far. That's option number 1, continuation, 100% remote learning. Option number 2 presents to us a number of different challenges. Option number 2 is what we call a blended learning option. Now, if you're in education or have been in education in the last 15, 20 years, blended learning has been a discussion during that time. It's the opportunity to have in-school operation and education that sits online for children to be able to access. Now, blended learning is probably the most challenging of these options for us, because it means that we have to look at various scenarios within this one scenario. We could look, for instance, at a 50-50 split, where 50% of the time children are in school learning, and the other 50% of the time they're accessing live material or asynchronous learning through our VLE. Now, those percentages can change. It could be 30% in school, 70% online, or indeed 70% in school, 30% online. But the option of blended learning is something that as an organisation we are investing in heavily. We are ensuring that if this scenario is what we are all welcomed back to in September, we are ready to face it head on. The blended learning approach will ensure that we can keep social distancing within school. It will ensure that we can take certain numbers back, but manage that process a little bit easier. And so although the blended learning option brings many educational challenges, it does help support that transition from 100% remote learning back into school in September. Now, option 3 is certainly my preferred option, and probably for most of you a preferred option too. Option 3, back to school. It says it itself exactly what you would want. Now, the complexity of that simple scenario, though, is obvious. Ms. Hannah has presented to you exactly what we've been doing this term, what we will continue to do over the summer, and the plans and preparations for a return to school. Because no matter when that happens, a return to school is going to be different than what we've experienced before. It is going to have different scenarios. It's going to require us to consider the movement around the building. It's going to require our parents to be as socially responsible as the children and the staff in this school. We're going to need to work together on this option. It is, of course, the preferred option because we want our children back in this building. Being here again today, as I have been now most weeks for the last few weeks, it's not the same without the noise of children. As I said at the beginning, a school is not a building. It is a community. It is a place that brings us all together. Without the children in this community, unfortunately, it is just a building. So we want our children to be back. We want our community to begin to come back together in this building to make it what we all want it to be. The complexities are there, but this preferred scenario for many of us is the option that we're looking at as what we would love to see. Now, it doesn't mean we're not planning the other two. And these 3 options are all being planned in detail to ensure that we are ready no matter what the authorities tell us, no matter what we are instructed to do. All 3 of these scenarios will be ready to go. So just that one last reminder that we will be waiting for authority instructions, that we will be waiting for them to tell us exactly what we can do in September. But I hope what I've given you is a little bit of confidence that everything, any decision that's made from our authorities, we're going to be ready for. We're going to be ready as an organisation, and we're going to be ready as a school and a community to welcome your children back to Founders, no matter what operating system that is in. We are going to get this community back together again after the summer, just as we are finishing it together right now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthew, for all of that. A lot of confidence in the way you spoke, so I hope our parents have picked up and those confidence levels have increased as we discussed earlier. So as I said at the very beginning, we had reached out to our GEMS Founders Parents Association, and I'd like to encourage any of our parents out there to get in touch with them if you have any concerns. They are our conduit between staff and parents, and often have answers to some of your questions, so you don't have to reach out to us. But here on the screen are just 3 questions that were repeated several times from the questions that we asked them. That first question there, what measures is the school taking to maintain the safety of students against COVID-19 when they return? I think Ms. Hannah was very eloquent and detailed in the sanitation procedures that we're taking care of, social distancing, etc. But once again, have to wait until we get all of the instruction there from the authorities. But I'd like to direct that second question, if I could first, to Mr. John. Could you come on screen for us, Mr. John, please, and answer the question, how will the school ensure that any academic gaps are quickly identified and addressed? Mr. John.
Thank you, Ms. Jan, and good morning again, everybody. Obviously, we have been working very hard to date to ensure that the learning that we've been posting for our students has been in line with curriculum standards, but we are aware that this is not a normal situation. So it would be folly to suggest that everything will be fine, and we of course are aware that we will have potentially a challenge here, and we of course be taking steps to mitigate this. So how are we doing this? Transition information is being passed up on each student to the following teacher. They will have that. The students will continue to be assessed against the curriculum objectives for each year group. Classwork will be adapted as appropriate. Planning considerations, any needs will be taken into account and planned for. There'll be interventions and there'll be target groups going on. It's very difficult to talk about specifics. Obviously, every child is different. Now, we of course will be working with you as parents as well with any constraints and directives imposed by the authorities. As Mr. Ian has already mentioned, the assessments will continue. Our Cat 4 assessments that always take place in term 1, they will be going on as normal, and our progress tests that normally take place in term 3, they've been postponed until term 1. So these again will be another way for us to gain information, valuable information on each student and how they've been getting on. So I'll pass back.
Thank you very much, Thank you, Mr. John. Mr. Ian, do you have any words that you'd like to add to Mr. John's in relation to the secondary school, please?
Thank you, Ms. Jan and Mr. John, for that information. And I'd like to echo all of the thoughts from Mr. John that do obviously apply to our secondary school as well. I would like to build on a couple of points that John mentioned, and that we do use obviously the data that we have to make sure that we are assessing and looking at any gaps that may have been identified in students' progress. Progress is not as straightforward to measure, as you will be aware, during the remote learning programme, but we've been looking at the momentum shift in learning as we have gone from March through to June. And as we end the academic year, we'll be looking at all of the data that we have collected, like I said, through the NGRT and all of the assessments that have been taking place to identify gaps and addressing those gaps in key groups of students and in key year groups of students. And I would just like to reassure all parents of examination students in years 11, 12 and 13 that there will be a November examination series planned for with Cambridge Assessment International Education. And there'll also still be a January examination period for those students who want to sit examinations in January. This is very important as the examinations were cancelled, like I mentioned previously. And should students want to be entered, we will be sharing information accordingly. And that will come through Ms. Vaughn, our examinations officer. Finally, just looking ahead and what students can be doing over the summer, our heads of year, our heads of subject, our heads of key stage are working very closely together to provide transition packs, revision packs, guides, and the work that they can be completing. You will be aware that our year 11 and 13 students are currently right in the middle of the Your Future, Your Choice programme, which is really helping them look forward to the transition from year 11 to year 12, that big gap in education, or big jump in education, should I say. And our year 13s, we are providing as much information as we can to help them transition into higher education and to the universities that they will be going to around the world. Finally, I just wanted to touch upon the tutors. Many questions coming in regarding which class students will be in next year. And like Mr. John said, we will be sharing that information very, very shortly with you so that our tutors and our middle leadership team can communicate with you any plans that they have for the start of the new academic year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ian, for that very conclusive roundup of how we're going to identify those gaps and what parents as well can do over the summer to help potentially close any of those gaps that may be there. Although, as Mr. John said, we have ensured that the provision through our remote learning has been at curriculum standards, but we acknowledge that there may be a few gaps that we will have to address, and all of that is in place, ready to go in September for whatever scenario we face. The last question that we have there, and I think I'd like to direct this question to Mr. Matthew, if I may, is around the size of our school. It's something that is mentioned quite a lot, and I don't believe that the size and the number of students in our school will diminish in September. I certainly hope not anyway. But can you give us any reassurance, Mr. Matthew, on how we will ensure the safety of all of our students in regards to the size of our school? Mr. Matthew.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. And thank you, colleagues, for such detailed answers to all these questions so far. I hope that I can give you a little bit of an answer to this one. It has been something that's been raised ever since day one about the size of our school, and that's normal. We understand that, and certainly from where many of us come from, 4,000 children in a school is large. One of the things that I've always expressed and always explained, though, is that the size of our school also gives us lots of opportunities. The size of our school, for instance, allows us to have 250 fully trained teachers. Those teachers all come with their own expertise, their own ideas, their own thoughts. They all bring that level of energy to the school on a daily basis. It allows us to have nearly 100 teaching assistants. It allows us to have over 100 support and admin staff. All of those people are part of our community, and all of those people bring an opportunity for your children, for the students of our school. Now, the question here is specifically about safety. And I think that I'd just like to put it back, which is that it is certainly a large school. There are 4,000 children in this school, but this building is built for 4,000 children. So from my perspective, there's no difference. If I was working back in one of my schools in England with 1,400 children in a building built for 1,400 children, we would be doing exactly the same as we are doing right here. And that's exactly the same as any school that you go to here in Dubai. The building has that capacity. We know that sometimes we have had words from our Parents Association, from our parents, about the corridors being busy and bustling. We get that. And of course, there will be things put in place to ensure that that's not the case when we need to socially distance and we need to move children around the school in a different way than we had done before. But it doesn't change that this building was built for all those children. And as Ms. Jan said, we certainly will be welcoming back that many children. We would be able to welcome back many more if we wanted to, but we won't go over the building capacity. We'll stick with exactly what this building is safely built for. And it's built as a new building. So one of the things you'll also find, and I'll finish with this, is that as a building that's only a few years old, actually the restrictions from Dubai municipality are much stricter than a building that was potentially built 10 years ago or 15 years ago. Our classroom sizes are often much larger than a school built 10 years ago. And so what that allows us to do is to manage the number of children that we have. We've always concerned ourselves about student safety, and that will continue. That hasn't changed. This community will continue to protect the children always. This safety has happened during remote learning when people have found it very challenging. However, child protection and safeguarding has been the #1 thing that everybody talks about in our school. And it was identified by our DSIB inspectors last week as a real strength of the school, the way we look after each other, the well-being of each other, children, staff, and of course our parents. And that's the big difference. The social responsibility we're going to expect from you when we welcome you back is going to be really heightened. So we're going to need you guys to work with us just as much as you're going to need to hear about our measures. We're going to need for you to be with us. So I hope that's answered the question succinctly enough. I'm sure that there'll be more coming through the parent survey, and we'll answer anything else that you need to again. But other than that, I thank you all, and I'll hand you back to Miss Jan to wrap things up for us.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much, Matthew. Yes, as I was driving into school this morning, I saw the sign on the big poster on the Sheikh Zayed Road. We are all responsible, and yes, we are all in this together. Social responsibility is key in these times. So thank you to all of our presenters. As I said at the very beginning of the webinar, we haven't enabled the chat facility to answer your questions live, because today we will be sending out another remote learning survey to all of our parents, where you will have an opportunity to add additional questions to those that we have already answered today. We do highly appreciate your feedback. Every parent who requests feedback from our previous surveys has received an email from either Mr. John or Mr. Ian, either to ask them to reply directly to them, or directing people to the right person to speak to. So that survey will be coming from the teachers to the GEMS Founders School Dubai parents today. If you are joining us and you're not a parent, you won't have that option, unfortunately. This is just our parent survey, so that we can work with our parents, listen to our parents, and make sure, as I say, we are all in this together. So just a final word from me to say thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Another big thank you to our presenters. A big thank you to our behind the scenes, Miss Mary, Miss Vanessa, who has been helping us organise the webinar today. Thank you very much to everyone who has joined us. I do sincerely hope you stay safe and stay well, and we look forward to welcoming you back to GEMS Founders School next year in whatever format that will be. Goodbye and thank you.